Is Tammy working tonight?
She is not. We're not going to live stream, but I will record it and we will put it up later.
Okay, so are we ready to start?
Yes.
All right, so tonight is Monday, January 25th. The time is 6:33. This is a meeting of the Budget Committee. We are doing just, we have already forwarded our recommendations for the 2021 budget to the Select Board. And the Select Board has asked us to, or has requested that we do a follow-up meeting and formulate some ideas regarding what changes we might like to see or documents we might like to add or questions that we think department heads should be prepared to answer. And all this information they're going to forward, I believe they're planning to forward it to the town manager for consideration for changes when this committee meets next year to review the next budget. So basically it's just a discussion, and what's good in this kind of a format is sometimes one or two ideas will spurn an even better idea. And so it's good to hear each person's ideas because someone else may actually think of something to improve on that idea. There's 6 of us. There are 2 members who are unable to join us tonight, and Lee Fisher is working until 7, and if she can, she'll join us when she gets done with work. So with that, I'll kick it off. Does anybody want to start? Some opening comments?
I do have one question. Did we send a summary of our reasonings to the Budget Committee?
I actually have that ready to go. I was waiting for the spreadsheet that Ruth sent us this afternoon to make sure that the numbers I had agreed with hers. And what I was thinking about doing, if this meeting doesn't take too long, is just reviewing with you the reasoning I was going to forward to the Select Board.
Okay.
Thank you. So we're here to discuss ideas for future Budget Committee meetings as far as changes we'd like to see, documents we'd like to be added, things along that nature that we feel would help us be more productive in our budget negotiations. I see Lois's hand up. We'll start with you.
So the other day when we were meeting, what I heard people saying, and I wrote down, was that we needed to ask for more specific breakdowns in the budget for the next year. So I think it particularly came up with the fire department, but if you look at the public works one, it probably could be there, and certainly the cemeteries one. I mean, we didn't know whether they'd even checked with public works. So I mean, I think more specific breakdowns on the spreadsheet with the numbers, but also maybe explanations of why.
So Rick Emmons actually agrees with you. He did send me an email saying the following. He thinks the department heads could include more lines in their labor budgets to help show where payroll is going. For example, chief could break down payroll into such categories as training hours, fire-related calls, EMS calls, per diem staff, and administrative staff. And he thought something similar with the public works might work as well. He'd like to see budget lines include payroll for plowing hours, ditching hours, mowing hours, paving hours, and the such and the like.
I had similar notes. Rick definitely broke it down into more details, but similar to what both Rick and Lois was saying, I agree. I was also thinking along those same lines, maybe required is a strong word, but I would like to require that there's a representative at the initial selectmen budget meeting when we're going over some of them, because then we could have asked, for instance, this year we could have spoken to the cemetery crew and ask them, more details about their equipment request. We've had the benefit of in the past of having the planning board member be part of either the selectmen or the budget. This year, they weren't. And I noticed that missing as far as getting a lot of information about the planning board's budget as well, so.
And do you think it would work better if they were present at when we do that initial meeting in which both the select board and the budget committee meet together? Or are you suggesting just when it's time for the budget committee to do its deliberations?
My recommendation would be the mutual meetings in the beginning.
And Jill, I
And then
think
I
I'd
would-
agree with you as long as everybody's looked at it. I mean, like sometimes I might not look at something, not on these, because I did look at these ahead of time, but on some things I don't get to it until just before. And so I really wouldn't have formulated the questions yet. Whereas if I'd gone through the first meeting with them, then the second meeting with them, I would have already had the chance to formulate my questions. Like tonight, I mean, it would be nice to have, we've talked about it, so now let's answer the questions. So,
Right.
So I think I agree with you that the first one's important, but I almost think that it would be nice to have somebody at all of them. So.
I have to say, I agree. If it was a perfect world, they would be present at all of them. I think, to me, this year didn't go as well for me as past years, in part being Zoom meetings, in part extra outside issues. But, the budget committee and the selectmen, I don't know what the timeline is. Things seem to go a lot faster this year. But just getting that information ahead of time so that, I think it is our responsibility as the budget committee to try and look at things ahead of time. And it's been evident in the years that I've been on who has taken the time to look at the budget and who is looking at the budget for the first time when we get to a meeting. And I know even for myself this year, because I didn't get a chance to really look at the budget ahead of time, my thought process, it was very evident. But I think it definitely, the more we can do a little bit of homework ahead of time will help us at all of the meetings, including understanding the way that we also email our questions ahead of time too, so that maybe if they can't be at the next meeting, they at least had a chance to answer our questions.
I think what helped, because in the past, people haven't done their homework, as you said. But this year, we had 5, or I think it was 6 members of the budget committee who watched the select board's meeting in which they were making their initial presentations. Normally, even though those meetings are always broadcast, there have been fewer people who would tune into the cable TV channel to watch them. And even fewer people who maybe looked over the spreadsheets prior to the budget committee's first meeting. But the fact that we had 6 members, who already knew what the select board's recommendations were going to be when we started our deliberations, I think that might have helped to save some time.
For me personally, Zoom's been amazing in that regard. Cable TV, I can't get to the TV all the time, for one. 2, I can't even promise you in the future I'll have access to the cable TV channel. But whether I was listening to one of the meetings, I'm not sure it was even for Durham, but I was in my car with my car phone doing the Zoom, listening to the meeting, so it really opens up the availability of attending at least one sense to get more information.
Go ahead, Paul.
What if we were to ask for a conveyance letter from the cemetery group? And then if the conveyance letter isn't sufficient, when we receive it, we could ask for them to come and for an explanation.
And can you define a conveyance letter, please?
Well, basically, they're saying this is our budget. So tell us about it. What's changed from last year? Why has it gone up or down? What's different about the budget?
So with the rationale is what you're saying.
The rationale, exactly. Yeah. That's I think many towns do it that way, just a really, a short letter. And then if there are still questions, we could still ask them at that first meeting. Let the administrator or the manager know that we'd like to talk with them to answer our questions. And I also wonder about if we might focus on one department with regard to, I heard some great suggestions with regard to Public Works and Fire, but so that we are able to nail down some specifics, could we focus on one department? Maybe Fire?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, right now, in terms of some of these suggestions for budget lines, one of the things I heard and one of the things that was discussed at the last meeting was the fact that the fire department budget, it's a large budget. It's almost $500,000, but it's only half a page. Now go back and look at admin. The admin budget's significantly smaller. It's a page and a half. I don't know, fire department budgets I'm familiar with of that size are probably more like 2 pages long. So I think this one is very short. And the problem is everything is grouped together in these lines we need to break out.
Well, that is partly the select board's doing. I'm sure if we ask Alan to think back amongst his 30 years on this board, we used to get a much more detailed report, and it was at the select boards and perhaps even Kevin's request that they didn't need all that information. It was at their suggest that they start combining lines and give us the report that we had. Maybe Ruth remembers that as well, but I believe it was the select board whose request was for them to minimize the lines. I see Alan has his hand.
That's true, Milt. Granted, the budgets that were submitted to us specifically, I would say the fire department, it was extremely detailed. But I have to caution all of us that, granted, we're making a decision on one final line. And when we went into the detail, there were many times when our recommendations were, well, cut this, cut that, cut that. You can do that as a budget committee. But when the townspeople come and vote, they're voting on the final line. And one of my concerns, and I keep hearing that people are saying, well, I want to break down in the hours. If all well and good, if you do this, you're going to need to do it from all departments. You just can't single out one department. And if we're doing this, what is our bottom line? What are we trying to accomplish by doing that? I certainly don't want, I don't mean this in a negative fashion. I don't want to see us trying to micromanage departments. If we don't have confidence in a manager, then we should express that in a professional manner.
Yeah. I guess my comment there would be, for example, and I agree with all of the things you said, Alan. I think they're very wise. But I guess, for example, for the fire department, for example, I'd like to know, well, how much of that labor is per diems? How much is call pay? And how much are officer stipends? And how much is meeting or training pay? And I'd like to have some sense of, for example, what they're being paid. I think that's reasonable to have some sense of, for example, what's the hour, excuse me, what's the hourly rate for our per diems? And I'm assuming it's probably a range. It's probably a range based on their level of training. But to have some sense of what the pay rates are, for example, I think that's for me, that's a reasonable request for a budget committee, so that we have some oversight, of town functions. And I guess one of my concerns is, this is the budget. This isn't just the budget we approve, but this is the budget the selectmen approve. So, I guess my question is, then if it's not in the budget, who understands this other than the fire chief?
Looks like Alan had to leave for a moment.
So, I think that's kind of my major question is, if it's not in the budget, who understands it other than the fire chief? Because again, this is the same document that the selectmen use. It's not just about us, the budget committee, and our recommendation. It's about the overall transparency and of our financial management. And if this information isn't in the budget, then where is it and who looks at it?
Paul, what would change regarding the budget committee's deliberations were we to have at least the additional information regarding labor? I agree with Alan. If you start showing everything in the budget, we're going to go back to the way it was, and we're going to spend longer. We're going to have longer meetings because people are complaining about all the various line items. So let's say we just asked for a breakdown regarding labor, as you said, how much is being paid per diem and what's going for training and what's going for the calls.
Yeah.
If you had all that information, how would that have changed our meetings?
Well, again, Milt, I think the important thing is to look beyond the budget committee and to ask the question, if it's not in the budget, then who other than, for example, in this case, if we're talking about the fire department, then who other than the fire chief knows what those wage rates are? And other than the person who's writing the checks in town hall. But that, currently the person who writes the checks, for example, isn't a manager. So I think it's important, not just for the budget committee, but for the selectmen, for that information to be publicly available, for it to be available, so that the people who are charged with managing the department on this next level beyond the fire chief understand what the costs are. And I think that I'm not sure if anything would change. It would depend on if we saw, it would certainly give us a greater understanding of the budget, but I'm not sure necessarily anything would change. It would depend, of course, but we would certainly have hopefully a greater understanding of the budget and not have to ask so many questions. Now that said, as Alan said, these are all bottom line budgets. So at the end of the day, our vote is to approve an amount for the overall budget. And that's it. But even though we're approving a bottom line amount, doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a little more information. And again, this is a $500,000 budget. I just don't think half a page is really enough to be able to evaluate it. And it just makes it, I think more challenging to keep track of what's what. And you have to ask 10,000 questions to get the answers. Why not lay it out a little better right up front?
Again, I'll state that once we get that detailed information, granted, it gives you so much of that is really, it's going to be historical information, and it allows you to feel more comfortable about making that decision. But I guess, Milt has been on this committee for 21 years. He's in his 22nd year, and he and I have served together a lot on this committee. And maybe it's my confidence and experience of knowing what had been presented in past years and knowing how things have transitioned into more of a less detailed, I guess, and it's having the confidence in those department managers. But once anybody comes along new, Lois being one, I'm not picking on you, Lois. But
All right.
that is just, if you don't have that historical information, sometimes it certainly can be challenging to make that educated vote.
What if we, in a sense, compromised? And we had, in a sense, a summary budget that is brought to us, but there are either attachments or supplemental information available upon request. So that those that are new, you know, I think it was 2 years ago, we did get the summary of labor costs, of what the per diem range was getting, what the call pay range was getting, that sort of thing. So I think that's something that can almost be a supplemental report that's available to us. Same with Neil has asked this time around, and it's usually been available to us, a summary of the fire department's activities. How many house fires did they have? How many rescue calls did they have? And, you know, I think getting a little bit of the picture helps, you know, especially if you are new or kind of getting used to this process. If you see that fire summary and they had 2 calls all year long, and then you look at their budget and they want $500,000, well, why? You know, but if you see that they've been to 300 calls this year, then yeah, they're pretty busy people. And I think it does help to decrease some of the nitty gritty questions. At the same time, I have been here when the budget was more detailed, and I didn't really attend the selectmen's meetings before, but I know the budget committee's meetings, you know, we only all got a taste of it this time around, where it's, you know, well, we can deduct $10 from this line and $3 from this line and $5 from this line. And so that gives me a total recommendation of $14,000 to deduct from this budget. And that it was understandable where people were coming from, but I do like I'm recommending $14,000, and my big broad summary is I think there's a lot of areas that the pencil can be sharpened and things can be tightened. And that's said a lot faster than line item adjustments.
So I have an observation and a question. Ruth did send out initially some stuff that I think we're asking about. For example, I'm looking at the cemetery committee's submission from Tia Wilson. I don't know who she is, but she gave a little bit of detail on each of the lines in her budget, explaining them. I maybe would have asked a few more questions, but I mean, that's kind of the basics of what I think we're asking for. And each department, like the fire department and the public works department in particular, do provide a PowerPoint or PDF, I guess, with some detail on those things, maybe not enough. So that's my observation. We're already getting some of this. I wonder how many people even looked at those notes. Honestly, I didn't until they were presented or discussed when we were live on the Zoom meeting. And the question is, I guess for Ruth, these guys must have a spreadsheet with detail on them. I've done lots of budgets when I was working, and I always had a spreadsheet behind my gross lines.
Yes, we all do.
So why can't we just see that? Is that would that solve part of the problem, or?
Well, you can absolutely see that, and it's obviously public information. We were actually instructed not to give a ton of detail. So that's one of the reasons why you don't get all the detail any longer.
Well, which budget do the selectmen get when they're doing their review?
They don't want the detail either. They don't
Want the detail either.
No.
So my question is, who's looking at the detail?
But you have to realize that the selectmen on a month-to-month, they're meeting twice a month. And usually on a twice-a-month basis, they're seeing detail. But when it comes to presenting the annual budget, I think based on their experience, they don't feel that they need to see it again. That's my observation.
Yeah, you know, I guess I feel that we have a charge here to be stewards, and that it's hard to be stewards unless we have the information. Otherwise, we have a number of lumped together line items where, you know, there are a lot of questions. And I appreciate that, you know, many members might have a better idea who have been here, you know, worked with this budget longer than I have in these lines, longer than I have exactly what's in there. But what I see is, for example, in the fire department budget or public works on some of these things, there are I have a lot of questions because I asked, for example, fire department uniforms. Where are they? Where's turnout gear? Where are EMS supplies? You look at the budget, you can't tell. So, you know, that's my only comment. I like Jill's thought, which is with regard to a lot of this could be handled just with a worksheet. For example, labor, then give us a little table, a worksheet that says, you know, here's our per diem labor, here's our call pay labor, our officer pay, our meeting and training pay. And, you know, here are our rates and, you know, here are the hours. Give us a little more detail. So, you know, other than that, I've said my piece here, but I think there is some, at least for me as a budget committee member, I feel that there's some information missing from the budget and that we would benefit from some more detail. But at the same time, I certainly appreciate the fact that, you know, ultimately we're voting on a bottom line budget. But I want to be in a position to be able to do my job as a budget committee member. Thank you.
Neil, the summary that you said came from the cemetery committee, was that in the paper book or was that emailed to us?
Both.
Yeah,
Everything-
both.
Yeah, everything.
I didn't
was in the-
receive all the emails then, I have to say, because I don't have that.
It would have been in the first email, probably.
And I have to admit, I did fail this time around picking up the book, so I know that I'm not a good steward in that sense.
And as Paul said, we, as a budget committee, are stewards of this, and we cannot just rubber stamp something based on what has been presented to us in a less detailed fashion. I mean, it is our responsibility, even though some of us have the historical information behind how things were created. And if they're obviously, and as Neil said, anybody that creates a budget, there's detail behind that. And that if it's the will, and certainly if there are individuals on the budget committee that need that information, then it should be provided.
Yeah, we have all that detailed information every year, especially Calvin. Chief does most of this on his own, but Calvin and I go over his budget with a fine tooth comb. We take each of those line items and we sort it all. So into like electricity and phone and everything. And so we know what he's paying on phone, what he's paying on internet, what he's paying on electricity. And then that's all combined into a line, you know, and so it would be fairly easy to separate that kind of stuff out.
But one of the big keys is when detailed information is provided to the budget committee, it requires us as members to do our homework prior to meetings.
What was the timeline this year of the budget getting finalized by
It was January. So one thing about this year that you guys need to know is we rushed everything. It feels
Right.
rushed because it was rushed. And the reason we did that is because we intend to do it as a referendum. And in order to do that, we needed to be able to have the warrant available for printing by February 1st. So usually the deadline is March 1st. And so we kind of have 2 months. And this year we really kind of had to back it up and squish it into, you know, a little teeny weeny spot and then push it forward. And so it was very rushed this year.
There are also just some minor things. For example, you know, not to pick on the fire department here or fire and rescue, but line 3502 is maintenance and repairs. Line 3510 is equipment maintenance. You know, we need a little more specificity in the titles. So
Okay.
for example, maintenance and repairs, I'm assuming this is probably the building.
Yes.
It looks like it's probably the building, but the lines need to say what they are. Otherwise we're in the position of guessing and having to spend the time to ask the questions.
To give the same type of clarification that the selectmen provided to us after they had made their vote.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I had something similar in my notes too, in the sense of, when I was thinking through it, not even something that's necessarily there each individual time, but, since we've been picking on fire department, I'll pick on public works this time around. But when it comes to replacing a vehicle, one of the questions that we always ask is, in the Y department is the cost of maintenance. So, what is the average cost of maintenance on a 1-ton plow truck versus the cost of your maintenance on this plow truck? So it may even be that just year to year, when there is more of a specific project that they want to do or piece of equipment that they want, giving us a little report that shows that they've done their homework and they can explain to us why they want it. I know that a lot of people's opinions jump to their own conclusions when they don't really get much of a summary, I mean, even Public Works, the pickup truck, so you want a pickup truck to go pick up parts. I don't know anything about how frequently you have to pick up parts. So am I buying you a pickup truck to go to the parts store once a month? Am I buying you a pickup truck to go to the parts store 10 times a day? Information like that is good to have as a summary when it comes to each individual project, just like the cemetery wanting tools. Why do you want these tools? Something that's out of the normal budget, showing that they have done their homework. When they were looking at getting a plow truck, here's the amount of money I want for the plow truck. Well, did you go out to bid? No, I didn't go out to bid. I like Harry next door, and this is the price that he gave me. That's not what happened, but again, showing that you did your homework. I looked into lease vehicles. Here were the pros and cons of doing lease vehicles. We've looked into the lease vehicles in the past. Here's our standardized list of pros and cons of looking into lease vehicles. So all you new people on the selectmen and all you new people on the budget committee, I already have that answered for you. Did you go out to bid? Those are the answers, or those are the questions that we're asking repeatedly year from year, and we're not getting a yes. And they're not taking it to heart because we asked the same question the following year and they didn't do it. So I'd like to see overall more homework on their part. Did you try to get grants like Lois was asking this year? And I know the fire department tried to do the air packs. Did you send it out to bid? Did you look into all other alternatives, and why did you then summarize into this plan? Is all information that I think would be extremely helpful to have in the future.
I think you're going to have a hard time. It's a great idea with regard to the maintenance. I think on that one, though, you're going to have a hard time breaking it down. And one reason is because they probably don't track it. Unless they use like a maintenance software package where they track all those things, work orders and regular maintenance and all those things, then it probably just gets all billed to, one account and that's it. So it's going to be hard to say for them to say, for example, how much maintenance was on, the pickups versus the wheelers, unless they actually at the end of the year, unless they tracked it as they were going, or at the end of the year went back and looked at actual receipts from work. And I'm just wondering, that might be a lot to ask.
So perhaps then even a smaller summary. I know we've gotten it in the past, more of a commentary. I know I do it
Yeah,
in my
yeah,
own
yeah,
house, I just
yeah.
said it to my husband just last week, we replaced the air conditioner in the vehicle last year. This year we're
Yeah.
replacing the rocker arms. You know,
Mhm.
it seems like, we're doing a lot more maintenance on this vehicle than we are doing on any of our other vehicles, and that catches my attention. And if you haven't, if you're trying to replace a 20-year plow truck just because it's 20 years old, that doesn't fly with me because
Yeah.
I drive my vehicles until even the junkyard doesn't want them. But if you can say to me, we're having to, put in body work into it, we're having to, replace the engine, we're having to replace the transmission, that resonates with me because I hear there's a lot more maintenance. I know you don't have to replace the motor in a plow truck every year, so it resonates.
Maybe like a little bit of a narrative, just hitting the high points.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anybody have some other ideas they want to put on the table?
I think somebody mentioned it, and it might have even been Paul. And it might be more of a task for the town manager or for the selectmen to choose. Um, but finding that kind of generic budget spreadsheet that you hand to the department head and say, okay, these are the lines that we want you to fill in. These are the lines that we need you to fill in. Um, and I think in the past, from Paul's perspective to Milt's and Alan's perspective, the pendulum has swung. When it started out, it was probably we're spending, 2 cents on each square of toilet paper. And now we just know that, our white goods is this amount. We got to find that pendulum somewhere in the middle, probably. And it may be easier for the department heads if the town manager was to supply them ahead of time with a plug and play sheet, which it sounds like, like Ruth mentioned right now, she probably is doing that to a degree with Kelvin, helping him out to get things plugged and played into his spreadsheet.
Maybe it's enough for us just to point out a few areas and bring it to the town manager's attention so that the town manager is aware that there are some needs. And because the town manager may also have some, specific ideas related to their experience and what they would like to see in the budget. But I do struggle a little bit with this idea of us getting this very abbreviated budget without a lot of detail.
Well, and the
It-
thing is, you do have to be sharp because, like in this year, you really only had one chance to make the request. We had the joint meeting, which was the first time we would see department heads, and then the only other time we would see department heads was when we, had our own meeting. And in the case this year, neither department head was present last Thursday. But normally, no, when we had several evenings, so if we didn't get information or enough information one night, we could ask them to return for our next meeting for additional information. But in this case, with the current format, if this was to be repeated next year, we would really need to have all of our questions asked for the joint meeting, which means, and you really can't do much homework prior to the joint meeting because we need to see the presentation. So you got to be thinking on your feet, or at least be sending out an email request shortly thereafter. Like in the case of the fire chief, information was requested and it was furnished to us in time for our meeting. However, he, didn't participate in that meeting if we had wanted to question him.
So one other point that I'll bring up, and again, I guess I am kind of picking on the fire department here a little bit, and my apologies. But with regard to fire department, of course, we have an EMS service. And I think it would be helpful to know, and I don't know if anyone tracks this information other than the fire chief, how much was billed out for EMS services and how much revenue was collected.
That's been a frequent question every year. So I agree, Paul, that might be nice to have as a supplemental because
And
it
I
seems like that
realized
question is
that-
asked every year.
I realized that you can't really correlate. It's not a hard and fast number. You can't say, aha, well, 60,000 was billed out, but only 40,000 was collected. And that's because it takes so long for medical billing. But over time, it gives you a picture. It gives you a sense of, you know, how much are we collecting? And, you know, how are we doing? It gives you a general sense. And currently, it's just I know I've asked the selectmen a few times, but I don't know if it's ever been followed up. I don't know if they know. And I think it would just be helpful to make that kind of a standard thing is, you know, how much did we bill? How much did we collect?
Ruth, do
So
you,
that's-
do
so
you
that's-
know, I'm sorry, one second, Neil. Ruth, do you know if if the chief or yourself keeps a running tabulation of both those amounts?
So we actually do all of our medical billing through Freeport. Freeport does all the billing. I know that Chief has requested that information from Freeport previously, and I know that he's had it at different points. I don't know what it is offhand, but that's where all of our billing goes through. So I don't track any of that, no.
But so he should have a running account
Yeah, I would think
based on
so.
his reporting from Freeport.
Yeah, yes.
It's only two numbers. How much did you bill? How much did you collect? We don't need reports or all the data, but those two numbers, I think they tell you a lot over time.
Go ahead, Neil.
Well, I was just going to say that's one of those types of questions that you can ask, but in the long run, I don't think it's going to make any difference. We don't have any control over it.
One of the big concerns was in the beginning when we started the EMS service, there was always that the initial question was, okay, we put this in, is it going to pay for itself? And at least by looking at numbers like this, you'd know what the expense is and what the revenues and the additional monies that have to be raised by the town to continue that service. It wasn't that the service, I guess it wasn't that the service wasn't needed because we were, I think it was Down East and Topsom that was providing EMS service. And depending on where you lived in town and were you calling Lisbon, were you calling Auburn, and the quick turnaround, it's much quicker turnaround to have it within our own town. But those questions did come up initially when this was put in place. And like you're saying, if you got the two numbers, you can look at it and say, it's a good investment, or I don't know if you want to really look at it versus a good, you can look at it as a good investment, but some people will say, well, it's costing us additional money. Well, it's EMS service is like just in case. When the emergency comes, we want to make sure that we can support our townspeople.
Right.
And maybe we're not just getting a one window number or a one snapshot number. You know, it sounds like with the EMS, as far as the delayed billing or receipt of the payments, you know, we've had the ambulance long enough now that we could get a 5-year summary so that we kind of know that, yeah, on average, we're getting 90% of what we're billing.
Well, and I do think we have to be careful here because, you know, we are kind of pushing into the realm of the selectmen's responsibility if we go too far. But I think just, you know, a couple of metrics would be helpful. But yeah, I don't know, maybe you're right, Joe. I don't know. All I know is I know there's a good deal of variance in contractors, collection contractors for medical expenses. And I know this from personal experience and being in charge of oversight for an EMS program, a new EMS program, and using a billing agency that was only able to collect on the order of, I would say 40 to 55%. We switched contractors and we went up to 75%. And then, we did, and, this is a decision of the town, but we did decide to also go with a collections contractor for things for bills that were overdue. And we bumped that up even higher. And so we almost doubled our EMS revenue in a very short period of time. But I guess it concerns me that no one asked the question. And I just think if you have those two metrics, it kind of puts it all above board. It adds a little bit of daylight. And so, you have some sense, and not that you have to delve into it too far, but gives you some sense of how you're doing. So you can maybe ask we can ask educated questions.
Well, it would be good to see what the collection numbers are and what is their collection rate, if in fact they're doing it.
Yeah.
So that answers my question. Is there something we can do about it? Maybe there is. I didn't know that.
You can request the information and then we can look at it and say,
Yeah.
Is it a good percentage or isn't it?
That's right. Exactly. Is it a good percentage or isn't it? And if it's not, it might be hey, selectmen, what's going on here? Why isn't this percentage higher? Could you look at this?
Will that be the job of the selectmen going forward, or will that be the job of the new town manager?
Oh, it could be either. I mean, could go either way. Or, the selectmen, the selectmen, they task the manager. So we could say, hey, selectmen, look at this. And the selectmen would hopefully say, hey, manager, look at this. What's going on here?
This will work.
So anyway, those are just a few items. But again, maybe if we can hit some high points, if we can just hit a few high points and turn it over to the manager, then, they can put their stamp on it because, they'll be bringing to the table their own experience and their own skills, hopefully with budgeting.
One other thing that got brought up is a better summary, perhaps is the word, from the CIP committee. Anticipated funds going out, anticipated funds needing coming in, that sort of thing. And from what got brought up this year, I think it would be recommended to the CIP committee to investigate the pros and cons of saving the money for a future purchase versus getting a loan when it's time to make the purchase.
Okay,
So
yeah.
that when people do ask the question,
Yeah.
it got brought up this year, why are we putting the money away ahead of time? Then there can be a good summary answer from the CIP committee.
Yeah, here's one of the challenges we've had as a CIP committee, and Ruth could probably speak to this at greater length. But one of the challenges we have is we have a fairly detailed policy, and that the policy sets out, like for example, one basic thing, and that, or a few basic things, a few basic tenets, and one of those is that we have a schedule. We have a schedule for replacements. And then that schedule includes the reserve balances, where the reserve balances need to be. The committee doesn't have any, control over, for example, over the Public Works Department or the fire chief or whoever. So, they basically have put those schedules together and the balances aren't in the schedule. I think this has been a transition for them. I think doing the schedules, and at least for some of them, and so they haven't included the balances. And so Ruth, bless her heart, she has taken it upon herself to take their information and put the balances in another table. which I believe she calls her 10-year plan. And so it creates a little bit of confusion. For simplicity, those balances need to be in the schedules, but the selectmen also have to demand it, because, you know, we can ask for it, but we, you know, we don't get it. So this process, that piece has to be simplified.
Well, perhaps this feedback will help them do that then.
Yeah, exactly. And with regard to your other point, I think that's a really good one, Jill, with regard to saving versus bonding, what the advantages and disadvantages are. I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
So for me, you know, one of the reasons I did it the way I did, Paul, with it all in one, was so that I could track the overall burden on the taxpayers.
Yeah.
So, you know, you talk about, you know, taking so much money out of taxes and putting it into a capital fund for public works. And then you talk about it for fire, and then there's other projects. But, you know, you can look at these individually, and it's important to look at them individually, but it's also important to look at the bottom line. So that's why I had put them all together in the spreadsheet. And, you know, there's a separate one under fire and a separate one under public works and a separate one under administration and everything else, because everything else goes in administration.
Well,
And then there's the bottom part that shows you the overall impact of doing this to the taxpayer.
I'm completely fine with that, Ruth, and I can work with it either way. Where I get concerned is when I listen to the recording of the last selectmen's meeting, and I think each selectman sat there and said, we don't see it this year. It's not in the plan. They each said that.
I went
And
over
then
it
they
with
made
them.
their decision only to carry 30,000 forward. And I have to say, I was tremendously disappointed after all the work that staff and the committee had put in, that, you know, I just felt that was a little disingenuous. I'll be honest. So, and I don't know how we fix that.
I have a couple
And
suggestions.
I don't know if an opportunity to sit down with Kevin. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to sit down with Kevin to look at that 10-year plan, because
No,
I
I
think it
have not.
is important that, yeah, that he understands that, so that we don't carry this, you know, this kind of false perception forward. Because, you know, I don't know if I don't know what's going on.
I found
Does
that
the
interesting.
CIP committee report back to the selectmen? Like, I mean, this is a curiosity question. Does Ruth have to be the middleman? It seems like the selectmen would be wanting a direct meeting with the CIP committee to get a summary of their findings and recommendations.
Yeah, you know, I think that's probably should have happened. Last year, we got interrupted with COVID. This year, you know, we got to the end of the process, and Ruth and I talked, and we said, and because of the timing, we said, well, let's just make a presentation to the budget committee and the selectmen. I think it would have helped if we would have just gone to the selectmen and we could have gone over that detail with them. So, you know, really the bottom line there is, I think, you know, we're still finding our way with that process in terms of, you know, the communication and some of those other pieces.
Yeah, because I don't feel it was communicated very well from the CIP committee to the mutual meeting.
Yeah. And I take responsibility for that. I probably, you know, the other issue was, you know, Ruth and I didn't coordinate with regard to exactly what would be in the booklet. And, you know, you guys really, I think, you know, email's great, but when you have a lot of files, it makes it very complex. If we have everything, you know, in a booklet, it includes the schedules, it includes, you know, if we're going to do the 10-year plan, rather than have the balances in the schedule, it includes that 10-year plan. And then we can look at the materials together. I think that's probably the way to do it.
And this conversation does remind me to say too, of course, we're taking the time right now to discuss everything that's not going well, but I'd like to say that I do think a change that is going well is having the mutual meeting in the beginning. I think that has helped tremendously, especially with the department heads not feeling like they're a broken record or not saying something because they thought they already said it, even though they did already say it, it just wasn't in our meeting, that type of thing. So I think that's definitely been a benefit, having the mutual meetings in the beginning.
I
So
would,
go ahead, Alan.
I would encourage, and one thing that I have taken upon myself, I've watched to see what agenda items are that the selectmen are presenting, and whether you have many times I don't have the opportunity to listen to them live. I go back in and I watch their meetings. And the neat thing about watching their meetings, you can see what their agenda is, and you can fast forward through the items that are important to you. So you can, I just feel like I'm staying on top of things that are going on within the town.
That's a good point. I've done that too, not as frequently as I should, but when I've had a meeting that I wanted to hear something, it is nice to have that fast forward button.
Yeah, it is.
So regarding future budget meetings, one idea I'd like to return to, an idea that Alan and Ruth will remember, when we were presented with the budget, like now we're presented with the budget from the year previous and 2 years previous. What I would find helpful is not only being reminded what the budget was, but I'd like to know what the actual spend was for that year, and that's been dropped.
No, so actually, Milt, what's on your spreadsheet is the 2 years previous actual, not the budget.
Oh, that is the actual.
That is the actual, yes.
Okay.
And then last year's budget and last year's actual.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
What I would find helpful is perhaps just a line that is the difference between that year's budgeted versus actual. When they spent, 429, was that 30% below what they were offered, or was that 10% above what they were given?
Maybe that's what I was
Again,
trying to say.
Yeah, because then you have the idea of the department head's ability to budget. Maybe that's a false assumption, but pointing out to them, you're always budgeting about 30% over, so let's try and tighten the reins there. I think it can be helpful feedback for them.
On the other hand, I would play devil's advocate here and just say that tightening the reins too much can encourage department heads to go out and spend in the last month. So I have $30,000 left over my budget. The budget committee's not going to give me the $30,000 next year if I don't spend it. So let's go out and spend what we can. And so that really encourages you to spend it and not to try and save it and put it wherever in undesignated funds or whatever.
I
Yeah,
think
it's
that's
definitely a fine
I think
line.
that's I can't think of I want to say the right word and be kind, but I think that's very hypothetical. I mean, the way we've been managing budgets and the way department heads have been managing budgets, I mean, that game is I don't know if it's just our town, because this is the only town I've ever been involved with a budget, but I'm guessing it happens everywhere. Department heads try to spend their allocated budget because they know if they don't spend it, they could very well be looking at a reduced budget the following year. So I
That's what I
don't
was
think
saying,
anything we're doing right now is encouraging them not to spend the money.
No, that's not what I was saying, Milt. I was saying exactly what you're saying. That if you cut it back every year because they didn't spend $30,000, you're encouraging them to come to the end of the year and spend that $30,000 so the budget committee doesn't cut it the following year.
I have to say, I've been kind of paying attention to that, and not to stick Calvin out by himself. But there was one year where Public Works wanted to pave their parking lot, and they wanted to install a flagpole. And I remember specifically asking, you had this money left over, did you do that? And he said no. So he, I think we have to give the department heads credit where credit is due, in the sense that when the town does say, I really don't like this idea, which got brought up in the town meeting that year. They didn't like the idea of money being spent on a flagpole or money being spent on the paving. I don't feel like we have sneaky department heads that are trying to
No.
sneak in getting things done because they have money left over.
No, not at all.
I think this changes also once you move to a town manager plan, because your department heads report to the town manager, and the town manager is going to want to look at the warrant, has to sign off on that warrant, I'm assuming on a weekly basis. So, they look at all the, all those receipts, and, so there's some accountability. All of a sudden you have another layer of accountability with regard to spending that we don't have now. So I'm hopeful that will change, or, and not that it's a problem now, I have no idea. And, I know I will be so sorry if Ruth leaves us, because she's done so much Ruth has done so much for the town. Thank you, Ruth.
Yes, definitely. Thank you,
For
Ruth.
sure.
Yeah.
That was the impression that I got from my mother's town. She was telling me that before the selectmen see the budget, before the budget committee sees the budget, the first, sort of sharp pencil that it has to go through is the town manager, who says, no, go back, tweak your budget. I'm not even gonna show my face next to this piece of paper. So I think we will see, tighter budget, so to speak, moving forward with the town manager. At least hopefully that's one of their job criterias.
Does anybody have anything else?
Has anybody been taking notes on all these points?
I've been
I
trying.
have some.
Yep.
Okay. I
Neil and I
started,
will-
but I didn't complete.
Neil and I will compare notes so that I can.
You'll also be able to watch this again.
Right.
So
That's
I have a question. Does anyone else want to see a line that says percent increase, decrease versus actual?
For the overall budget in the department,
no,
or for
for-
each
for-
line?
For each line. I mean, right now we have a percent increase, decrease, and it's versus last year's budget, not what they spent. Which to me is.
Oh,
that doesn't make any-
actuals. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you mean what they're requesting this year, compare it to last year's actual versus comparing it to last year's budget?
Yeah, I mean, I always do that in my head, but it'd be nice to see it there.
Yeah. I have to
I'm surprised
say,
it's not there.
Neil, and it's sad to say this, but I think I've always been assuming it was a percent increase or decrease over last year's actual, which I know saying it out loud makes absolutely no sense because.
There
But
is a column that's labeled last year actual.
Yeah, but they're talking about the percentage. So if we budgeted 10,000, spent 5,000, and we're budgeting 10,000, and it says there's a 0% increase over last year's budget, that's true, but it's also 100% more than we spent last year.
yeah, that's a very good point, Neil.
Yeah,
So
that's kind of an easy thing to do.
So
Yeah.
it would be expenses, expenses compared to last year actual?
Yeah,
The 2021 proposed budget line, you just have another column that says percent increase, decrease over actual. One over budget, one over actual, if you want to use budget. I would use actual.
Okay.
It's called sunset budgeting.
So actual dollar amounts, not just percentages.
No percentage would be fine. But we know what they're asking. We know what the actual number is. We know what they're asking. But they don't tell you how much.
I guess
They don't
I'm still not following. I see a column for last year budget. Then I see a column for last year actual. And you want to add an extra column that says what?
No, look under
And-
2021 this year.
Right.
In the
Where it
original
says-
budget sheets, there's an original request number from the department head.
Right.
And then there is a percent increase decrease, which is based on last year's budget, not last year's actual dollars spent.
Okay.
And I would do that. I would prefer to have actual percent increase decrease. Or both.
Okay.
You get it, Bill?
Yep, I think so.
Okay.
Well, and I would think, Neil, that actually for when they underspend, yes, you want an actual and you want to be able to see it. But for me, when they overspend is when I like to see what the actual percentage is. Because if they're spending 150% of what their budget is, I want to know that. And just scanning down a list of actuals, it's easy to see where they're overspending. The underspendings, yeah, everybody can keep, you know. But if there's one place where they're overspending, it sticks out.
So Lois, you're requesting then a column beside the over short for last year. That's an actual percentage.
Nope, I'm asking
Right.
for the same thing that Neil is just in your actuals. If somebody had a $10 budget, but they actually spent $20, then it shows up in that actual column as an overspent amount, that they went way above what their budget was, and it shows up. And to me, those are the things that you redline, that you look at and you say, wait a minute, why was that? You know,
Yeah,
why did you overspend that much?
There already is that column in there. That column's there already.
So here's my budget spreadsheet from this year.
Okay,
And you can see the over short for 2020. You can see it sticks out in red. I make it red so I can see it.
oh,
Really.
pardon me, yes, indeed, yep.
So that way I know where I've overspent and
Yeah.
where I've underspent. So
Yep.
So Neil, explain to me again, if you wouldn't mind, what additional column do you
so,
want?
so let's pull this one across, and this is going to be the actual budget, and then we can take one where
Actual to 2021 budget.
Right?
20 actual to 2021 budget.
yeah. So I'm trying to find something that's really different. All right, we'll go with this one. So we can take this, and so, wow, okay, that's not gonna work. All right, there's gotta be something in here that I went up on.
Well, just
All right,
What
we
about
can,
line 29?
change the cell number and do them all.
well, yeah, I can, but, oops. All right, so we're gonna take this year's request. No, that goes the wrong direction. Hold on. We're gonna take, no, that's right. Sorry, this year's request minus last year's actual. And then we're going to divide that by last year's actual, and make that a percentage. So then you can see that went up 5.5% above, well, it's the same because I spent what I said I was
Right?
gonna.
Right, so drag that cell down a few, or yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that one.
Because it's a 0, right?
These
Oh, that
are,
one.
yeah, this one.
That's crazy, girl. You got to explain yourself there.
Those are publications. Those are always crazy. You never know what you're going to spend on that one.
Was that one where you had $600 and you spent 49?
Yeah.
Is that what?
Yeah.
But you know, they keep, yeah, we keep wanting to buy those stupid code books, but for whatever reason, we haven't done it yet. But yeah, so that's basically what I think Neil's asking for.
Yeah, it's not a crisis. I can do it myself, but
Yeah.
I can't, so I'd like to see it.
Well, the percentages are weird sometimes though, because, some of them, like, all right. So like this one, 27.09% is an increase over last year's what actually spent. But you see this line is only like
Right.
30 bucks. So you got to kind of weigh that as well.
Yeah. And that's why it's also helpful to see past years and just look at the actual number, like the publication. If on average you're spending 600 and last year you didn't, what happened, Ruth? Oh, well, COVID hit and, the government closed all the publication buildings, so we couldn't buy anything. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
you can get an
and more
explanation.
importantly, the bottom line for me, what's the bottom
Right.
line?
Well, let's see what my bottom line was last year. Well, 13.52% above. Well, most of that's the town manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet it is.
But it even caused you right then, Ruth, to give an explanation.
Yeah. Well, and you can see here my percent spent was I only was left with 2% of my budget last year.
Yeah,
Pretty
I think when you read through these notes in the budget too, administration does a pretty good job. They list approximately 10 bullet points of the major reasons for increases and decreases.
They're also a less variable department, though. They're not weather dependent. They're not health dependent. They're not mechanic dependent.
Mechanic is a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is, I think when you look at the admin budget overall, you've got a little more detail and you do have detail in the notes. And I don't think, with some of the other departments, we're getting as much detail. In other words, good job, Ruth.
Some of the numbers are hard to break down. So like public works. So you could break down the labor line between winter and summer. So usually workers' comp defines winter as 4 months and 8 months is summer. So you could take 4 months, I don't know, October 15th or November 15th to the following whatever. Or you have to take the previous spring plus the winter, actually, because so it's kind of even more complicated. So you could break it down that way. You could break it down into overtime versus not overtime. We don't have a ton of overtime because Calvin's really good at trying to cut down on that. So if the guys work a lot, during a snow event, he tries to cut down some of their other hours that particular week, not in total. Fire department, yeah, you could, the per diem especially, because I know a couple of years ago we added the per diem to the fire department. So I think that would be very interesting for you guys to see what did that add.
Yeah. With Public Works, what you could do is you could say, you have your full times. Right after full time, you have the number of full-time employees that you're budgeting.
Yep.
You're budgeting 3 or 4. Then you have your part-times. How many part-times are you budgeting? This gives you a sense of the total size of the crew. And then you have your seasonals. So maybe you have 3 lines, your full-times, your part-times, and your seasonals.
Yeah, we don't really have seasonals
Oh, okay.
per se. We have on-call, and we have one gentleman who works for us in the summertime to do the mowing.
Okay, so you're on calls.
We have
Yeah,
on-call.
and you're mowing. Yeah.
Are we done with our ideas? What I would like to do is to just quickly review the spreadsheet that Ruth sent out today. And what I'm going to send back for budget committee notes. I just want to make sure that I'm stating it correctly. So on your screen now, you should be seeing the spreadsheet that she just sent to us late this afternoon that shows our numbers. And I'll just go in order. I'm also looking at the sheet that the selectmen had sent me that showed their recommendation and their notes, which explained their vote. So there was 1, 2, 3, looks like four votes that we differ from them. The first one is the Eureka Center. And the change that we voted was for instead of transferring $490, we're recommending that a total of $2,754 be transferred from undesignated. That the $490 comes from fees, and that $2,264 comes from undesignated funds. And that's to fund a repair project that they already raised money for last year. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Under general assistance, our recommendation is that we transfer, first of all, is that the total amount be $600 and that we transfer $420 from undesignated. And the reason I'm giving is we just feel that's closer to reality, an amount closer to what's actually needed.
So what I wrote in my notes is we've never spent this much until last year. So $1,000 historically has been too high of a number. And it's also been determined that if the need is greater than $600, the selectmen are able to get the money out of the general assistance fund without needing a special meeting. So it's a no risk to lowering the amount.
Okay. Neil, did you write that down?
No,
I can send it to you if you want.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'll look at my notes tomorrow and won't be able to read it. Another change we made was to planning board. We changed the total article amount to $31,742. And our reason was we felt a 2% increase over last year. Last year's actual was appropriate.
Yeah, because that was what the selectmen, in a sense, was doing as an overall budget increase, and because we had no explanation from the planning board as to a sense of need.
Okay. And then we changed telecommunications. The total amount we're recommending is $50,000 be transferred. And the reason I wrote down was the amount's closer to the funding we received.
I have a whole big paragraph, so if you like it, I'll share it to you again. But I just wrote, in past years, we have spent above our income because of a large untapped balance and knowledge that franchise fees would continue. Now we are nearing the end of the contract and franchise fees may not continue. We believe it's time to sharpen the pencil, tighten this budget, and work our way back to the income amount.
Yep, I'll ask that you send that to me.
Yeah, we had also mentioned there's a possibility of moving some of those administrative fees into administration.
For next year, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so Jill, you're going to send me a rewrite for 2 of those.
Yep.
And that's all that I can see for changes.
Solid waste was also different, if I remember correctly.
I thought the only thing
Nope.
different
Yep.
was the, where was I? Solid waste. Was the bulky waste, but the board's gonna take that out anyways, I'm sure.
Okay,
Correct. Because that's going to
Yeah,
be free this year.
Actually, the selectmen did take it out because they were looking at the possibility of having a separate article, and that was prior to having feedback from Pine Tree.
Right.
Yep, that's correct. So that their amount of 310,000 already had removed the 10,300 for bulky waste day.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
so Ruth, do I need to share this to everybody on the committee to follow the proper rules, or can I just share it with Milt?
Actually, you can just share it with Milt.
Okay,
So you can share anything you want with any individual person on the committee. What you guys can't do is you can't talk as a committee in email. So you can't email the whole committee and then Lois answers you and she emails the whole committee and then Milt answers and he emails the whole committee and you're basically having an illegal meeting.
okay.
But can Lois send pictures of her cat to the whole
Yes.
committee?
Jeez. I'm so
She already had-
The dogs. I'm more interested in the dogs myself.
Between the dogs barking to go in and the dogs barking to go out and the dogs peeing on the floor
Oh,
during the meeting. And then the cat's butt in the picture. Sorry.
no
But
problem.
that's my life. And then, yeah, that's my life.
Any other business to come to the committee this evening? Well, I'd hoped to give you we were supposed to get the night off. I was great that 6 of us, I thought, were able to come back together and honor the request by the select board. I will, once I hear back from Jill with her notes, and Neil was going to compare notes with me, I will forward a document to the select board on everyone's behalf. And I do encourage you to watch the Zoom meeting that's taking place tomorrow evening. When the select board met last week, those were sort of recommendations. When the select board meets tomorrow night, they're voting on actual numbers. So they could stick to their original article amounts. They could, on those 6 that I just mentioned, the 6 articles I just mentioned, they could possibly rewrite their article so that it reflects what our decision was, or not. So if you're interested in hearing their discussion whether or not to match our recommendations, I recommend that you tune into their Zoom meeting tomorrow night, which will take place at 6:30, and the link would be available via the Durham website.
I think it would also be helpful to attend because if they don't agree with the budget, they're going to be talking about the wording in the warrant. And it's probably good to have a budget committee to help with insight there too.
You want to take 2 seconds and see the wording? Are you guys
Sure.
interested?
Oh, we don't know what that final vote's going to be.
No, but I've already written the warrant. I mean, obviously,
Ruth does.
I know what it's going to be.
Did you have an unpublished meeting, Ruth?
I was gonna say, why does this feel like the federal government? Where the,
All right, hold on. Let me pull up the warrant.
see, here's the truth. We all think we've been working on a budget, but in reality, it's already been created for us.
All right, guys. I know it's here somewhere. There it is. All right, I'm going to share this. All right, so here it is. You'll notice most of them aren't really different. I'll show you the ones that are different. So most of them are just yes, no. There's a bunch of fund warrant articles, so the board's trying to consolidate some of the funds, which makes sense. And then we're going to get to the ones that you guys are. So here's where you're different. So This one shows the differences. It shows the select board recommendation, the budget committee recommendation, and then it asks whether the voter would like the select board recommendation, the budget committee recommendation, or neither recommendation. And we are required to allow them to choose neither, so that's why that's in there. And I have already shown this to our lawyer, and he says he thinks that that will work fine.
If I could just interrupt for 1 second, there was one other article amount that we differed with the select board, and that was fire
Fire
department
department.
operations. So their amount, as you can see in front of you, thank you. We had our amount is to raise $472,753, and the reasoning I wrote down is we feel a reduction in the labor line is appropriate since the amount has been fairly steady since 2019.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So Ruth, will there be any type of narrative that goes with the articles?
So not on the ballot, but I will be doing, like I did the last time, a mailer, and we can have the mailer available to people who want it at the election.
So
Ruth,
Did you want to look at something specific?
on the appropriate
Appropriate and raise.
and raise for budget committee,
Yeah.
why are there 7 digits?
Well, because, and I just noticed that because there's a 0.0 at the end that I need to get rid of.
I can't see it, so it's so small on my iPad that I can't see the period, so the dot, the decimal point.
Yeah, it's a
So,
0.0 at
okay.
the end, so. sometimes
Okay.
So
All right.
Ruth, if people voted on neither recommendation, would it revert back to last year's budget?
Correctly. So one of the first questions on it is going to be to see if the number Article 4, see if the town of Durham will vote to raise an appropriate amount not to exceed the 2020 Durham municipal budget for any budget articles that are not approved. So theoretically, if everybody votes yes on this and they said no on both of the recommendations for the fire department, then the fire department would revert to last year's budget. And that's
Are you able to underline not approved or like not approved below? When I read that real quick, I was like, oh, that's an easy vote for the budget. We're just keeping it at 2020 or below. There, whole budget done. Moving on now.
That would be a lot of work for nothing there, Jill.
I know. That's why I'm like, maybe we need to clarify that a little bit.
That's undesignated. Ooh, I can't enable it. Hold on. All right. Boy, now I'm looking at it again. I'm finding typos. All right, and you said you wanted me to. I can bold that. Underline it. So,
Ruth, I've got one for you.
yeah.
How about the article that lets you to exceed, I forget what the name of it is.
LD1.
LD1, thank you.
Yeah,
Is that at the end?
it's here. It is here. Property tax levy limit, Article 28. I actually have not had a chance to figure out what the levy limit is. I have to do that before tomorrow night, but we will exceed it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What does that all mean? Or
No,
that'll be in the explanation you mail out?
Yeah, LD1 is a law that they've passed, I don't know how long ago, where you can't exceed the growth factor in your town for taxes. So you take the growth factor in the town, you take the growth factor in the state, and you add them together and you multiply it by the amount of money that you raised last year, and you're not supposed to raise more than that. And if you do, then the town has to vote to increase the property tax levy limit in order to do that. We didn't need it last year because our budget actually decreased last year, but we will need it this year.
And if the town says, no, I don't want to give you permission to increase the maximum property tax levy limit?
And we can't. We would have to redo the whole budget.
That's a dangerous question then, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
required, but yes, it is. It's a lot
Well,
when you can speak about it on the floor. You know, it's hard
Yeah.
ballot situation.
Yeah.
People are voting.
I tried leveraging that one town meeting a number of years ago. One of the problems is the school system is exempted. They're not part of that mandate.
Right.
And nobody's ever said no, so it's kind of
Oh.
a waste of time.
No, to my knowledge, nobody's ever said no. In our town. I don't know about other towns.
Well, an overall vote, no, the overall vote has not been no.
Right.
So that's what it's going to look like. There's 39 questions.
So what's it gonna take, Ruth, for me to get the words Board of Selectmen changed to Select Board? Do I have to request that in an ordinance or something? That is so outdated.
No, I understand where you're going with it, and I obviously agree with you, but I don't know. You'd have to talk to the select board.
Or the selectmen,
Board
all
of-
men.
You know, you should, Lois, you should talk with MMA because it's not just Durham, it's every town in Maine.
No, some towns don't do that. They don't
Oh,
call
okay,
them,
well,
like,
most of
they
the.
call them board,
some
they
would
call them
still
select
do.
boards. Because I was in Raymond today and on their big lit up sign on Route 302, it calls it the Select Board.
Yeah. See, I put select board in all of mine here.
Right, but some of them that you scan down through, it says Board of Selectmen.
Did I do that? I went back and forth.
So some of them, I don't know, it's going too fast for me to read them, but at one point I saw that. That's why I wanted to ask what I have to do.
I wonder where, okay, I'll have to look for that because I usually do write select board.
I think you can put the words Board of Selectmen in your search box and then it'll find it for you.
Select.
There's Selectmen right there.
Oh, it's in the select.
And keep going down.
Yeah, it's all the warrant. These are our articles that just are copied every year.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why.
Yeah.
So I can just change those. See, you just talked to me, Lois, and I change it.
God, if I'd known that, I would have come years ago.
Yeah.
All right, is there any other business for the committee this evening?
You guys all set?
I think we are. If nobody has anything
Yeah.
else to say.
All right.
All right, I thank you again for joining us, Ruth. Thanks so much for your participation as well.
Yes, thank you, Ruth.
Thank you for hosting
You
this.
guys.
Thanks.
Hey, Ruth,